29. Beginning again. The phasals crouched on the high platform where they had been left. A series of mechanical devices had carried the pallet through the framework of the iron tower. Finally, it swung down the rim of a vertical wheel and jolted to a halt over a deep well. The hollow shaft at the heart of the fortress was broken by a circle of similar upright wheels. Light from the moon overhead shone down through the gantries. Steam rose from grinding engines in the mechanized hell below. Something new was happening. The girders creaked their protest as the engines turned faster and faster. Across the chasm, the opposite wheel was lowering a second platform to their level. On it stood the group of guards, motionless and implacable, each carrying another insect helmet for the recruitment of its own younger self. The other wheels began to turn, each lowering their own platforms out over the well. The new pallets stopped level with the first, overlapping their neighbours until a wide floor area was formed over the abyss like the plug of a volcano. Guards and phasals faced each other across the area. Rust-red and dust-grey pawns in some diabolical chess game. Or so the Doctor thought as he watched from the walkway high on the side of the well. He pulled Ace and Vale back into the shadows as the last wheel carried its platform down into the arena. On the pallet stood the younger process. The repulsive leech leaned its head vulture-like over the edge to view its victims. Beside it was another figure, the guard who had been Shonzi, with the pilot who would be Shonzi slumped over one shoulder. All time was being swept away. Everything the Doctor valued, his friends and his freedom, was being crushed. The past rose in phantom form to mock him. The future, like the great gate of legend, slammed in his face. Nothing went right anymore. His own process was still not complete. He was still only will be the Doctor, or maybe, or perhaps, just another possibility. Only the Iron Mountain was stable in the crumbling world of his Sardit TARDIS, and that was sustained by the tenuous power leached by the process from its phasal slaves. The final chance, which he recognised but did not understand, was descending from the sky upon them all. Viewed objectively, it could be the most momentous impact event since Adric hit Mexico. He reached out to reassure himself that Ace was still there. She squeezed his hand. Across the well on another walkway stood a silhouetted figure. Its black cloak billowed about it, but there was no wind. Its invisible eyes transfixed the Doctor. His ship awaited its release. So do I, he thought. That was the trouble with machines. However biocomplex they were, they always stated the obvious. The endless nagging threat in his head was quite enough to be going on with. Just don't howl, he thought. His nerves couldn't stand it. He measured out a length of filament cut from the cocoon and hitched it round a girder. "You were in the brownies, Ace," he said, raising his voice above the head of steam. "What did they teach you about knots?" The process's platform had reached the main level. The creature lurched off, foot-mouth over foot-mouth between the ranks of its subjects. "There is only now," it declared. "The disruption, the alternatives, they will cease." The guard Shonzi deposited its burden onto the trembling floor. The kid aimed a well-aimed kick at its captor and pulled free, scrambling for shelter into Amnoni's arms. A throaty gurgle, which could have been laughter, emanated from the process. "The recruitment," it croaked. "Complete it." The guards, each carrying a new insect helmet, advanced on their victims. "Stand back," warned the younger peccary. He walked unsteadily forward, fighting back the pain in his eye. "We are still a crew. We have possibilities of our own to fulfill." The huge head swung to look at him. "Not anymore. All possibilities, they are mine." Ryoga stepped up beside his captain. "Where's my future, you filthy object? Have you bungled that as well?" "The new now. It is decreed already." The monster turned to its guards. "Take them all." The phasals stood their ground. A telepathic nod of readiness. With one cry, the youngest and oldest peccaries launched themselves at the guard captain. Amnoni abandoned her decorum and barreled into her older self. Chesspearl hurtled at her counterpart. Ryogus eagerly grabbed the guard that had once been Vale. With a scream of hatred, the little pilot threw himself at the Shonzi guard. The creature, nearly twice his size, caught the child easily. It swung him down to the floor and began to force a helmet over his head. "No!" yelled Ace from the walkway high above. Somewhere in the frame of the tower, the bells attempted their broken chimes. "That's enough!" The doctor's voice echoed out its order. "How dare you brawl in my TARDIS?" The guards and phasals stopped the attack where they stood. The process craned its head upwards at the intruder. He was dangling high above them like a trapeze artist. He clung to the unwound filament, his foot resting on a brown owl's triple reefer that Ace had knotted into the strand for him. "Well, the gang's all here," he said. "Excuse me for gate-crashing your party, process, but I thought you'd forgotten to invite me, and I did provide the venue after all." The process hissed angrily. Steam jetted from the gantries. Iron clanked as the tower's structure began to move. The doctor twirled gracefully on his filament. "You see, I want a little chat about your future." The monster tried to squint with its circle of eyes, but evolution had not allowed for such a function. The doctor was a spindly black shape among the criss-cross of girders beneath the ever-growing moon. It was all moving. "Business, it is none of yours," cried the brute. "You know nothing of me." "I know processes take time," he called, "and that makes you a thief." "The world, it is mine. I created it. Now there will only be now." "Oh well, if you only want now, you're welcome to it." The doctor let himself slide further down the filament until he reached another of Ace's knots. He left a smear of blood behind him. The cord was cutting savagely into his hands. "You know what now means, don't you?" he sneered. "For pitiful creatures like you, now doesn't even reach to the end of your snout." He allowed his venom a free rein. He had never loathed the creature more than this, or taken its struggle for survival in the Darwinian universe so personally. It was him or it. In a frozen now, processes go nowhere. Now is a petty little world that gets smaller by the minute. It's where you belong, process. I'll swap you now for my TARDIS. The process swung its head from side to side. "The doctor, bring him down. No more disruptions. Everything is planned." The doctor slid down the filament to the floor and squared up to his monstrous rival. He pointed up through the gantries with a bloody finger. "Then what is that?" "An omen. It proclaims the new now. The process is new now." The doctor blew a loud raspberry. "You're a has-been process, a no-hoper. You've been outmaneuvered by someone older and wiser than you. That moon goes beyond your new now." He looked up. A fine red dust was falling through the clouds of steam. Metal screeched and clanked as the girder sections of the tower pulled apart. The massive structure was opening like an iron flower to receive the descending moon. "That is the new beginning," cried the doctor. "It was invoked by your future, the older process you could have become before you threw away that possibility. That process is dead, and now I shall step into its shoes and begin again." "Professor?" said an urgent voice at his shoulder. He turned and saw that Ace had somehow found a way down to join him. "Not now, Ace. I have my ship to reconstruct." "But Doctor, there's something I didn't tell you." There was a blood-freezing wail from the gantries above. The Banshee circuit was howling at the moon. A violent hiss came from the side of the well. Out of an opening slithered the battered shape of the older process. "My new beginning," it croaked. "My new now." It began to raise itself painfully onto one footmouth, but its body was torn and still oozing black blood. "The beginning, it is mine," called the younger process. "You are dead. Your world has failed. And the failure, you are part of it. This world, it shall be swept away in my new beginning. The Doctor glanced up at the descending moon. It was close. The two processes were hissing at each other like angry kettles. They could carry on like this until they boiled dry. The old regime is ended, he called to the younger monster. It turned on him angrily. The new regime of now, I shall create it. But then you'll become the old regime, and there'll be another new young process to overthrow you. The older process struggled closer to its younger self. Trapped, it gloated. My beginning. It is the only way. The younger creature spat as it reared up. With a shriek, it fell upon the older process, its lamprey teeth, both mouths fixed into the flanks of its victim. Ace turned away, repulsed. She covered her ears against the terrible screams of the older creature. And those two want to be gods, observed the Doctor. They're pitiful, interrupted a voice. He shuddered. Vale was standing beside him. Look at the moon, thought Chespearl. So cold, like a ghost. Shadows shifted across the great surface. The young peccary gripped Ryogas's arm. It's the scaphe! We've found it! The flanks of the tower were closing around the sinking globe like anchor gantries on the space docks of Gallifrey. Vale cowered under the stare of the baleful light. It is her eye, he thought angrily. It's just a moon, thought Amnoni, like any other moon. The little pilot had struggled free of the Shonzi guard. He backed away from the struggling processes and stared up at the descending globe. Silly grumblies, he said. It's a great big egg. Anyone can see that. The Doctor winced. The moon had looked to him like a roundel in the walls of his lost TARDIS. It took the child Shonzi, his protégé, to see things that were lost on the fuddled brains of adults. Inside the shell of the vast globe, something was moving. The shadow writhed inside its egg. In the cat's cradle, where time was tangled, the tyrant despot process had summoned its own beginning. The monster was supervising its own birth. It couldn't be allowed. The younger process arched up from its hideous crime. Black blood slobbered on its footmouth. The future, it is corrected. Now there is only now. Wrong again, process, called the Doctor. He nodded up at the mottled egg. Cracks were appearing in the shell. Your own beginning is about to correct you. The process emitted a gurgling shriek of frustration. My gods, their minds sustaining the world. They can destroy you. The scattered guards turned in one movement towards him. A wave of the process's hatred, amplified through their telepathy, bowled the Doctor off his feet. He scrambled for cover, but found himself lifted into the air. Higher and higher he rose, flailing on a crest of malice. His ship was slipping away from him. He heard the clanking bells and the howl of the banshee. The shell of the egg was closer and closer. It was splitting across. He didn't know what he was saying or how to stop it. No one had told him. Ace, he choked, use all available resources. The other phasals were backing off in terror. Ace watched the Doctor spin helplessly in the air high overhead. She saw the massive moon shell splitting open. Suddenly, the dimensions were changing. The walls were shrinking. She saw the bulging TARDIS doors split open as the newborn process emerged. It's the beginning again, Professor, she called. I've seen it before. She ran across the floor of the tower and grabbed at the filament, pulling it desperately towards him. The beginning, this is what he was seeing, a fresh page or canvas. Guards! Phasals! He cried, his voice crackling under their onslaught. Chronauts, listen to me! This is the beginning. You are free, people. You are reborn. The process has no power over you yet. He dipped in the air as he felt their will falter. Close above him he glimpsed slimy hide through the cracks in the shell. Below him the process gurgled with murderous rage. You have a choice, persisted the doctor. Reject the process's cruel slavery and find your homes again. Remember Gallifrey. He heard a telepathic sigh of release. The power snapped and he plunged towards the floor. He snatched at the filament pulled by Ace and swung on it, his hands bleeding again. On the floor below, the process shrieked. Its guards were pulling off their lifeless helmets. They swayed uneasily, stunned by their release. A cascade of broken shell fell from the egg. The new process squealed as it began to force its way out. Vale watched both Ace and the pilot run towards the little runt Shonzi and hug him. When Vale saw himself, his own future, released and stumbling towards him, he gave a cold laugh. And his future laughed too. Then a bolt of pain knifed into their brains. It was the I that lived with him again, the insane old woman who thought he was her princeling. He would reject her and still have the power she promised. He was an individual. A boom like thunder, the whole tower jolted. The shrinking world beyond had reached the boundaries of the fortress. "Chronauts!" called the doctor from above. "I need your power now. I claim my TARDIS back." They were reunited at last. The minds of the Gallifreyans bonded in one thought, to restore the power of their deliverer. The bells of the tower rang out, and at last the chime was complete, the chimes of the gibbet cathode troisième in the TARDIS console room. The figure dangling on the filament was bathed in a new glow of reassurance. Maybe became a certainty. Will be became now. The shrinking grids of the tower were filling slowly in. Restoration was taking form. "It's all right," he called, as the filament gently descended. "I'm back. I am the Doctor." The process crouched beneath him, condensing its length like a coiled spring. It leapt up, its jaws snapping at his legs. He swung wildly on the filament to avoid it. "The world! It is mine!" it shrieked, and leapt again. Overhead, the lowering ceiling of Moonshell broke open completely. The first head of the embryo process, dripping mucus, forced itself out and squealed its claim of inheritance. The younger Vale ran forward. "No, it's mine! Mine by right!" He held up something that glinted in his hand. It was the TARDIS key. "You left it in the front history door," he grinned. "Important, is it?" His head ticked wildly, as if a power was pressing on his mind. "Give me that!" demanded Ace. "You're the last person who's having that!" She ran angrily at him, but he turned, a flood of burning anger in his eyes. "Ace!" cried the older peccary. He knocked her sideways and caught the blast of Vale's hatred full on. Flames burst out inside his coat. He crumbled in smoking ashes to the floor. Ace screamed. The monsters bellowed. Vale's eyes darted wildly. "The ship is mine," he said with an intense quietness. The spindly form of his future came to join him. "You're beside yourself with fear, Vale. Out of control!" goaded the doctor. He clung to the filament for his life, swinging dangerously close to the open maw of the process below. Above him, the newborn monstrosity squirmed voraciously down. "You'll never be an individual, Nanny's boy," he added. "Neither you nor that archaic old battle-axe of a Pythia belong in my ship. So go, now." The anger blazed up through both Vales. The process gave one final leap. Its jaws fastened to the doctor's leg. It dragged him down, screaming. The bolt of Vale's burning fury seared off target into the new monster above. The egg and its creature exploded into a cataract of fire. The process spat out its victim and flung up its head in a wail of despair. Burning shell and flesh rained down. Its past was destroyed. Its now ceased. It vapoured away into nothing. "Vale, my successor!" ranted the voice in his mind. "The future! I must know it! Bring me this ship!" He twisted and clasped his head. "No! I'm an individual! It is mine! I'm the future, not you!" His future self watched him in bewilderment. Across the floor lay the doctor, bewildered and vulnerable, his leg twisted. Ace crouched, her arms around him. Shonzi stood beside them. got you all together," Vale growled, and ran at them with his burning eyes. A flash of silver. A cat ran out of nowhere and leapt at Vale with a vicious yowl. Its claws sank into his back. He reeled sideways, beating at the impossible creature in agony. "Obey me, Vale, you are mine," cried the Pythia. "Never," he railed. Get out of my head forever." In the blind rage he would never master, he turned his burning fury on the I in his own mind. Ace crouched down, burying her face in the doctor's jumper. The doctor observed Vale's final immolation in dispassionate silence. Beside him, the Vale guard faded too, vanishing into the curling greasy smoke. "Much too grand guignol," the doctor said after a while. "A mind like Vale's only occurs once in a millennium. In the wrong head it can be the deadliest weapon of all." He rose on his painful leg and gently sifted the blackened TARDIS key out of the ashes. "Don't you ever care?" said Ace, pushing away her tears. "I'm a doctor. Call it professional detachment." She shook her head in indulgent despair and took his hand. It was trembling.